everyone, how are you going? Just want to pre-warn you, I have a little bit of a summer cold, so my voice might crack at some point and I apologise in advance. Today I'm going to talk to you about dialogue and paragraphing when you're doing some creative writing, and I'm going to discuss in particular the conventions, how to format them. So I'm going to talk to you first about dialogue and how to structure that, then I'm going to talk about narrative paragraphs, and then we're going to have a little bit of a practice. So with dialogue, the basic rule is that a line of dialogue from a new speaker begins a new paragraph. So the first person can talk and you'd just be within the paragraph, but as soon as someone new talks, you need a new paragraph. And for each line of dialogue, you indent it a little bit so you can clearly see it's a new paragraph. But if the same character continues speaking, you just leave it on the same paragraph. Basically, new speaker, new paragraph. Same speaker, same paragraph. It's basically how it goes. And you can see this down here. Oh, he says, because it is part of them and of their way of life. You see how it's the same speaker, so you don't need to indent down. There are a couple of questions I get, usually. So both said Angus and Angus said are fine, so you can put the tagline said in front or behind, although the second one is more common, Angus said. For example, if I was to say, says he, it sounds a little bit awkward, but he says sounds more natural. So, usually put the said after the speaker. You don't capitalise the next word after dialogue unless the next word is a proper noun. So, he says, it's not a proper noun, you don't need to worry about capitalising. But if it was Angus says, then Angus is a proper noun, Angus has a capital. Don't worry about using synonyms for said. There's always a lot of debate about using different words instead of said and mixing it up a bit, and occasionally that's fine, but usually said is sufficient. Said is sort of one of those words that we skim over and don't even notice, but if you've used a lot of synonyms, it can start to make your writing really complicated and you're focusing more on the tagline than the actual dialogue. So said is fine. Occasionally mix it up, but don't stress too much about it. Not every line of dialogue between two people needs attributing. Remember that. You can also use facial expression and body language to infer who is speaking. So you'll see here, if it's just between two people, I ask, line of dialogue. Next person speaks, oh, he says. It's obviously the other person in the room. There's only two people in the room, so the next person speaking is obviously number one, number two. Number one, number two. You don't need to keep saying he said, she said, he said, she said. You can just, if it's just two people, leave the tagline off altogether. Here are some common things I see in my students' writing. Can you use italics? Yes, you can. That's fine, but don't overdo it. Every now and then is fine though. Can I use all capital letters? No, never. That's what exclamation marks are for. Also, don't use bold, ever. You don't need it. Okay, exclamation marks or the occasional italics, but capitals and bold, you're basically screaming at your audience if you're doing that. Extra exclamation points or question marks, some students will go on forever. You'll have like 10 question marks used to really emphasize something or really indicate that the character is curious. No. Don't do it. One is sufficient. One gets the message across. More than 3 dots on an ellipse, so a gap in talking or an interruption. No. 3 is always the rule. 3 is it. There are the rare occasions where you might use 4, but unless you're going to look up the rule to see what situations that would be appropriate in and your particular situation matches that, then go for it, but generally 3. And why is this? Well, because if you use more than 3 or more than 1 or bold or capitals, then your writing looks really immature. Basically, that's the point there. You can get everything across that you need to get across with one exclamation mark or question mark, or with italics, or with the actual words that they're saying and the body language that they're showing. 2 quotation marks on either side are for conversation, while 1 single quotation mark is for a quote. So in an essay, if you're putting a quote in, you'd use a single. In a story, if someone is talking aloud, you'll use two. Also always punctuate inside of the question mark. Sorry, I'm getting a bit tongue-tied. You'll see here, right in there, that's where you put the punctuation, on the inside of the quotation mark. If you have a tagline afterwards, like she said, then you use a comma. Okay? No tagline, no comma. Use a full stop instead. So if there's nothing coming afterwards, you use a full stop. Pretty basic, pretty simple, but easy to get wrong. So I'm going to start talking to you about paragraphing. Most of you are probably used to paragraphing in academic essays, and you know the whole new idea, new paragraph rule. But in fiction, you start to mess with those rules. You start to have even more chances to put a new paragraph in. And paragraphs are really essential in fiction because it gives your reader a break. It helps your reader follow along without feeling completely overwhelmed by a huge chunk of writing. So you start a new paragraph in fiction when you have a new idea or a new topic, so same as an academic essay. But you also start a new paragraph if a new event is happening or a new action. You start a new paragraph if the setting changes. You start a new paragraph if time moves forward or backwards, so a flashback, or you're going an hour or so later. You also start a new paragraph when a new person is speaking. And you can also start a new paragraph for dramatic effect. You can even have a paragraph that is 1 sentence long, or 3 words long, or 1 word long. No can be a paragraph in fictional text for dramatic effect. So let's have a look at this. As the afternoon moves on, so obviously this is a time change, it's a new paragraph. Glancing through the window I see. New location, new setting. Even though they're still sitting in the room, they're looking at a new location. So, new paragraph. Once, as boys in summer, flashback, new paragraph. And so we fish through the heat. So this is obviously maybe a new action, or it could be a move in time. So it's chunking a whole heap of time together, and so that's a new paragraph. I was just approaching the wharf. New location, new paragraph. Beyond the porch there is. New location, new paragraph. The woman at the stove is tall, and etc, etc. I'm assuming there that this is a new idea. A new character is being introduced, and so new paragraph. Suddenly and unexpectedly. This is that dramatic effect paragraph I was talking about. These are all good ways to start your paragraphs. If you're stuck, feel free to use these as a guide. So let's have a practice here of some dialogue. I approached her and asked, "Do you know how to get to the library?" She shrugged. "No idea." "Thanks." "No worries." I continued on, feeling even more overwhelmed than ever. So let's have a look. I'll give you a second. How would you format this? And here we go. I approached her and asked. So as soon as you start talking aloud, you put the dialogue marks in. She shrugged. "No idea." Indicating who's speaking here, so I've put this beforehand. Remembering to put the comma there before, full stop inside the dialogue. New line, new speaker. Thanks. In italics because I wanted it to sound sarcastic. New speaker, new line, no worries, punctuation inside. I continued on, feeling even more overwhelmed than ever, because that's the end of my sentence. You could use a comma, but that would imply that they're talking and walking at the same time. Alright, so to have a look at this one, you might want to pause and have a read, and there's lots of places where you could put the paragraphing, but just have a think about where you might put yours. And this is obviously Alice in Wonderland. And here we go. And she ran with all speed back to the little door. So we have an action, therefore we have a new paragraph. As she said these words, her foot slipped. New action, new event, new paragraph. Just then she heard something splashing. Obviously trying to do this for dramatic effect. New paragraph. Would it be of any use now to speak to this mouse? I think this is a new paragraph because she's starting to think here. It's a new idea. So I hope you are able to learn something new. Feel free to come back and have a look at this video as many times as you need. If you have any questions, ask them below. And as always, you can find these notes on my Prezi, which I'll link down below as well. See you later.